What's up, everybody? If you want to join the greatest online Star Wars community, the Fandom Menace, make sure you hit that subscribe button before today's video starts, so you don't miss out on any updates and you're always the first to know when our newest videos go live.
The following is a world-class Bullshitters exclusive.
Nobody likes a premature Peter.
Pizza time.
So I wanted to wait until the numbers for The Rise of Skywalker were a little more solid to say this with 100% certainty. The Rise of Skywalker has the lowest opening of any Disney saga film by a lot. Now there are a lot of reasons for the lowest opening weekend in the history of the Disney saga. The political climate, Christmas shopping, The Witcher, Cats. Let's be honest, it's Cats. The film grossed a whopping... wow. Wow. The real reason The Rise of Skywalker underperformed is because the last few years have absolutely stunk for Star Wars. If you're in the Fandom Menace, this film is a victory lap, a proverbial I told you so. We watched the decline of Star Wars very, very closely. Now, just because we were right doesn't mean that we're happy. Before we get ahead of ourselves, let's look at the numbers for this weekend. The Rise of Skywalker opened to $176 million. $176 million is not a failure in any sense of the word. That's a lot of money. I must be crazy to say that this is a disappointment. Well, I'm not. What I'm saying is The Rise of Skywalker is the lowest opening weekend of any Disney Star Wars film in the saga by a lot of money. The Force Awakens opened with a whopping $248 million domestically, making it at the time the highest opening weekend in history. It's currently third after Avengers Infinity War in second place with $257 million, and Endgame in first with a massive $357 million. The follow-up to The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, opened to $220 million, $28 million lower, but still big. The Rise of Skywalker, the final chapter in the Skywalker saga, opened to $176 million. That's $72 million less than The Force Awakens and $44 million less than The Last Jedi. For months, we've been hearing excuses from industry analysts that the third film in the trilogy rebounds and makes more than the second chapter. Well, after months of that overly optimistic appraisal of the situation, we now know that's not the case. Each film makes less than the film that preceded it. Let's take a look at this graph and show the downward trend for the Disney trilogy. That's not good. No matter how they try to spin it, the data shows that less people came back for the conclusion of the Skywalker saga than the previous two films. Again, $176 million is nothing to scoff at, but it's not the high some were predicting. For fun, let's take a look at that number and compare it to the opening weekend for Avengers Endgame in China. Avengers Endgame in China made $175.9 million on its opening weekend. That's about the same as Star Wars and its biggest market. Speaking of China, how did Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker do in the most important market in the world? It fucking flopped. Variety has the story. China box office, Rise of Skywalker, beaten by martial arts finale Ip Man 4. Martial arts spectacular Ip Man 4, the finale, was the no contest winner at the Chinese box office over the weekend. Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, while doing great business in the rest of the world, limped into the third spot in China. Skywalker managed $8.73 million in normal sessions, but the addition of the previews on Wednesday and the midnight screenings late Thursday rang up an estimated 12.1 cumulative by the end of Sunday screenings. This is far, far away the weakest opening performance of any of the recent Star Wars films in China, and its lifetime total won't come close to any of the others in the franchise. Online ticketing agency Maoyan slightly upgraded the forecast of the film's final total from $18 to $22 million. That compares to the lifetime scores of $126 million for The Force Awakens, $69.4 for Rogue One, and $42.6 for The Last Jedi. The early Star Wars films were not released in China as the same cycle as the West, and as Chinese filmgoers have not been steeped in the franchise's lore and legend, that more than poor reviews seem to have limited the film. So the Star Wars experiment in China has failed. I get why companies do it, but it hasn't really worked for them outside of Marvel. People just aren't interested in what Disney calls Star Wars. Sure, The Mandalorian is great, but that's because there's no Kathleen Kennedy involved. More on her a little later. The new characters introduced in 7 aren't going to become part of pop culture, like Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, Darth Vader, and literally any of the main characters from the original trilogy. They just aren't any good. People want to put the blame on toxic male fans, incels, man babies, etc., but the numbers prove that no matter what insults are hurled or excuses levied, people didn't come back to watch these new characters. You kill off Han Solo in The Force Awakens, less people come back for The Last Jedi. You kill off Luke in The Last Jedi, even less people show up for The Rise of Skywalker. Killing what we love to elevate what we hate didn't work at Disney. Our pal Scott Mendelson is back, breaking down the box office and making a few excuses for The Rise of Skywalker. Let's take a look. Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker opened with $175.5 million domestic. There are signs, a low cinema score grade and poor weekend multiplier, of a disturbance in the Force. Lucasfilm and Walt Disney's Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker opened with a forceful $175.5 million domestic debut. That's 20% below the $220 launch of The Last Jedi, and 29% below the $248 million launch of The Force Awakens in 2015. It's still the third highest December opening ever. If the estimate holds, it'll be the 12th biggest opening ever. To the extent that the overall number is a disappointment, it's only such in comparison to previous Star Wars movies and recent Disney flicks. There are signs of a disturbance in the Force. The film had a weekend multiplier of 1.95, which is below the 2x multiplier of The Force Awakens, Rogue One, The Last Jedi, and Batman vs. Superman. It's closer to the Twilight sequels, all of which dropped like a rock and ended up with their 2x multiplier their opening weekend. For the record, The Rise of Skywalker is receiving generally mixed to negative reviews. It currently rates 58% rotten, and has a 54 Metacritic score. It's essentially tied with Solo, a Star Wars story, despite that film's much higher 70% fresh rating. That's how the tomato meter tricks you. The Rise of Skywalker isn't getting horrifically panned by critics in general, any more than The Phantom Menace did in 1999. I would trade anything to have The Rise of Skywalker be as good as The Phantom Menace was. There were plenty of disappointed critics that summer, but the consensus was less worst movie ever and more that nearly wasn't as good as I was hoping. Just because I loathed The Rise of Skywalker doesn't mean everyone else did. Well, Scott, I think there's a lot more than you realize. We're still dealing with a movie that opened to $175.5 million and was only slightly less leggy over the weekend than its relative predecessors. If Star Wars really did pull an Amazing Spider-Man 2/Dark Phoenix, selling out the general audiences in order to appease the vocal hardcore fan base, or give them what they thought they wanted, we'll see that play out over the next 2 weeks. Ditto if they reacted to the divisive online, at least, Last Jedi by giving us a painfully generic threequel as we saw with Justice League after Dawn of Justice. For that matter, it is thus far performing like the prior two Star Wars threequels. Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back both opened in platform release before eventually going wide, while Return of the Jedi opened wide over Memorial Day weekend. But Revenge of the Sith opened higher than Attack of the Clones, which opened higher than The Phantom Menace. In terms of total domestic gross, Empire and Clones ended up earning a lot less than Star Wars and The Phantom Menace, while Jedi and Sith both earned more than the sequels but less than their respective Part 1 installments. The Rise of Skywalker may earn less than both The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. Yeah, I think Scott's right there. That said, even a halfway decent Christmas gets it to $621 million. Even if it goes badly between now and February, A, Star Wars is starting over in 2022 with movies not directly connected to the Skywalker saga, and B, Disney and Fox's combined global box office for 2019 was already over the $12 billion mark before this weekend. Doesn't make an excuse for Star Wars, Scott. Even if The Rise of Skywalker collapses, Disney will still be the king of the mountain, especially if The Mandalorian delivers a crowd-pleasing season finale. Star Wars was always going to face huge challenges and an uncertain future after The Rise of Skywalker. If Star Wars 9 is disliked or indifferently received by the masses, that's a problem for the next one. Look, The Last Jedi did exactly what Scott's predicting for a failing Rise of Skywalker. It hurt the next Star Wars film. Fans have been saying it for years. The Last Jedi killed Star Wars, and Disney's been saying, forget the past, kill it if you have to. Well, when you need some quick money, let's bring back Han Solo and Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia. But that didn't work this time. It's funny, a few weeks ago we were talking about record-breaking first-hour ticket sales, but they didn't translate to record-breaking success. Funny how that works. I'm interested in seeing the second weekend drop for The Rise of Skywalker. The Force Awakens had a 40% change, and The Last Jedi had a massive 69% drop. If we take Scott reasoning into account, and The Rise of Skywalker performs like The Force Awakens, that would be $106 million next weekend for The Rise of Skywalker. But if we're realistic, we're probably going to see something similar to The Last Jedi, with another 69% drop. Star Wars is broken. The reason I feel like we'll see another bigger drop is because people have moved on. The Last Jedi got less repeat viewings than The Force Awakens, merch barely supports this film, and critics aren't bending over backwards to defend it either. And we'll talk more about that next time. So what do you think about the box office of The Rise of Skywalker? Are you surprised? Do you think this is a huge success for Disney? Or you're like me and not surprised that it's another Star Wars film that performs lower than the one that came before it? Opinions vary on which film of each trilogy is the best. Some people like Return of the Jedi better than Empire and A New Hope. Some people like me prefer A New Hope to every Star Wars film. It's just taste and preference, but those films had the luxury of ending on a high note and pleasing a lot of people. Yeah, the ending of Return of the Jedi is a little hokey with Yub Nub, but it's still a satisfying conclusion. Revenge of the Sith, another satisfying conclusion. But The Rise of Skywalker, not so much, and it's not really must-see viewing. And that's why I don't think it's going to do as well as Scott Mendelson is saying. I think the film's going to continue to decline weekend after weekend, like most films do, and The Rise of Skywalker won't be the biggest selling Blu-ray of the year either. Remember, folks, people want to say, oh, The Last Jedi is the highest selling Blu-ray ever. Avengers beat its lifetime sales in about 3 months, so yeah, it just goes to show you that Marvel really is the modern day myth. I mean, the online interest in this film was not lacking per se, but the trailer in 2 months did what Black Widow could do in 5 days. I just think that goes to show you kids, people online, care about Marvel more. It is the cool in thing, and Disney Star Wars decided to go against being the cool in thing. They wanted to evoke nostalgia, but at the same time piss on the fans that were passionate about the things they were being nostalgic for, they're trying to sell to us. And it didn't work. It didn't work in any way. Merchandise, figures, it didn't work in any way. And now, well, they have to suffer the consequences. I'm not necessarily happy to watch Star Wars die, but I am happy to see Disney Star Wars take a nosedive, because it's not really Star Wars. It's how you would describe Star Wars to an alien and they try to make their own film. The spirit's gone, the thrill is gone, the love is gone. Where is it? I don't know, but it's not showing up in this film. Rise of Skywalker was a very, very hollow film, lifeless, MacGuffin the animated series, as I like to call it. Well, it's not even that good. It doesn't deserve that. Just called MacGuffin the movie, and it swept the Oscars. Hell, let's hope not. But I digress. Folks, I will be back with a lot of content about The Rise of Skywalker, because this was the most important film of the year for the fandom menace. It validated us. And if you want to see our 6-hour review, you can go over and find the link all over our social media pages. But I'm going to sit down and I'm going to really write an in-depth analysis of how I felt about this film and why I consider it the worst in the Star Wars saga. But in the meantime, check out this video, check out our other videos. I'm going to have one talking about how the media disowned this film before it was reaching general audiences, and a whole lot more. So make sure you guys are subscribed to this channel, have your bell notifications turned on to all, and be on the lookout for all the new World Class Bullshitters content that you can handle. This week we won't have a High Council or a World Class Bullshitters podcast because it is the holiday season. So if you celebrate one of the holidays, Hanukkah, Christmas, Kwanzaa, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, and enjoy your time with your family, your friends, your loved ones, and do the thing that I always talk about here on the channel. Go out into the world and be excellent to each other.